You should be grateful I'm even staying with you after your failure," my wife said while hiding her affair. She thought my recent job loss made me desperate, but I'd already hired a private investigator. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest, but I kept my face neutral as Sarah continued packing her designer purse. She was heading out for another girls' night, the third one this week. 6 months ago, I would have believed her. 6 months ago, I was still the successful regional manager pulling in six figures, and she was the devoted wife who supported my career ambitions. Now I was supposedly the failure who should be grateful for her presence. "I'll be back late, don't wait up," she said, not even looking at me as she checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. "And maybe think about what I said, about being more appreciative." I nodded and watched her leave, then immediately pulled out my phone to call Detective Martinez. The photos he'd sent me 3 days ago were still burning in my memory. Sarah, wrapped around my former colleague Brad Morrison at the downtown Marriott. The same Brad who'd been instrumental in getting me laid off during the company restructuring. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I'd been desperately searching for new employment, working 18-hour days on job applications and interviews, my wife had been consoling herself with the man who'd helped destroy my career. And now, she was making me feel like I should be grateful she hadn't left me yet. But Sarah had made one critical mistake. She assumed that losing my job had broken me, made me weak and dependent. She thought I'd take whatever scraps of affection she threw my way because I needed her income to survive. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment since the day I found her first suspicious text message. The job loss had actually been a blessing in disguise. It gave me the time and motivation to investigate what I'd been too busy to notice before, and what I'd discovered was going to change everything. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I'm 42 years old. Until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. Married to Sarah for 8 years, living in a beautiful house in the suburbs, both of us successful in our careers. I was the regional sales manager for a major pharmaceutical company, and she was a marketing director at a mid-sized advertising firm. We were the couple that other couples envied: attractive, successful, financially stable. The cracks started showing when my company began downsizing. I'd been with them for 12 years, consistently hitting my targets, building relationships with major clients. But when the new management team came in, suddenly my performance reviews became critical. My sales numbers, which had been solid for years, were suddenly not meeting expectations. My team, which had been cohesive and productive, was being reassigned to other managers. I should have seen the writing on the wall when Brad Morrison got promoted to district manager. Brad had been my peer for years, someone I'd considered a friend. We'd gone to each other's weddings, shared drinks after tough days, covered for each other during family emergencies. But apparently, friendship meant nothing when corporate politics were involved. The final blow came during a restructuring meeting where Brad announced that my position was being eliminated. He delivered the news with fake sympathy, talking about how difficult these decisions were and how much he respected my contributions. But I caught the slight smirk on his face when he thought I wasn't looking. "Budget constraints," he said with practiced regret. "Nothing personal, Marcus. You understand how these things work." But I was starting to understand exactly how these things worked, and it wasn't about budgets or performance. It was about positioning and politics, and I'd been outmaneuvered by someone I'd trusted. Sarah's reaction to my job loss was initially supportive. She held me while I processed the shock, assured me that we'd get through this together, reminded me that her salary could carry us while I found something new. For the first few weeks, she was everything a supportive spouse should be. But as the weeks turned into months and my job search stretched on, her attitude began to shift. The pharmaceutical industry was going through massive changes, and positions at my level were scarce. The few interviews I managed to secure either led nowhere or resulted in offers for significantly less money than I'd been making. Sarah started making little comments about my situation. She'd mention how tired she was from carrying the financial burden. She'd suggest that maybe I was being too picky about salary requirements. She'd compare me to her friends' husbands who'd found new jobs quickly after layoffs. "Mike's husband had 3 offers within a month," she'd say while scrolling through her phone. Of course, he was more flexible about location and salary. The comments became more frequent and more cutting. She'd question whether I was really trying hard enough. She'd imply that maybe I wasn't as valuable in the job market as I thought I was. She'd make jokes about being the breadwinner in front of our friends, jokes that weren't really jokes at all. What hurt most was how our social circle began to change. The couples we'd socialized with for years started excluding us from gatherings. Not maliciously, but unemployment carries a social stigma that people don't want to acknowledge. Suddenly, I wasn't the successful sales manager they respected. I was the guy who couldn't find work. My closest friend from college, Dave, stopped returning my calls. When I finally reached him, he was awkward and distant. "Hey man, I'm sure something will turn up soon," he said, but I could hear the discomfort in his voice. People didn't know how to act around failure, so they chose avoidance instead. The isolation was crushing. During my working years, my identity had been tied to my career success. Without that, I felt invisible, irrelevant. Sarah's growing contempt only reinforced what I was already feeling about myself. 3 months after my layoff, I noticed she was working late more often. She'd come home after 9 o'clock, claiming she was picking up extra projects to help with our finances. She'd be on her phone constantly, texting and taking calls that she'd step outside to answer. When I asked about it, she'd get defensive and accuse me of being paranoid and controlling. "I'm working my ass off to keep us afloat," she'd snap. "The least you could do is trust me instead of questioning everything I do." That's when I started paying closer attention. I noticed she was dressing differently for work, more provocative outfits, more expensive makeup, new perfume. She was going out with friends on weekends, but never invited me along. She'd started going to the gym regularly, something she'd never shown interest in before. The final straw came when I found a credit card statement she'd forgotten to hide. There were charges for expensive restaurants I'd never been to, hotel bars, lingerie stores. When I confronted her about it, she exploded. "You're going through my personal papers now?" she screamed. "This is exactly why I need space. You're becoming pathetic, Marcus, paranoid and clingy and pathetic." Her words stung because part of me wondered if she was right. Had unemployment made me paranoid? Was I imagining problems that didn't exist because I couldn't handle my own failure? But the evidence was there in black and white. Hundreds of dollars spent at places she'd never mentioned visiting. Charges that didn't match her claimed activities. A pattern of deception that couldn't be explained away. That night, I made the decision to hire a private investigator. I used part of my severance package to pay Detective Martinez's retainer, and within a week, I had my answer. Sarah was having an affair with Brad Morrison. The man who destroyed my career was now sleeping with my wife. The photos Martinez provided were devastating but also liberating. Sarah and Brad at expensive restaurants, holding hands across candlelit tables. Sarah and Brad entering hotel rooms together. Sarah and Brad kissing in the parking lot of her office building. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. But I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I started planning. I consulted with a divorce attorney, James Kellerman, who specialized in cases involving adultery and financial misconduct. I learned about asset protection, evidence preservation, and strategic timing. I discovered that Sarah had been using our joint credit cards to fund her affair, which constituted financial infidelity. Kellerman was a sharp-eyed man in his 50s who'd seen every variation of marital betrayal. "Document everything," he advised. "Maintain normalcy while building your case. The more evidence you have, the stronger your position." So I played the role of the defeated husband while secretly building my case. I copied financial records, saved text messages, and continued working with Martinez to gather evidence. Every day brought new proof of Sarah's deception, and every day made me more determined to expose the truth. The hardest part was enduring Sarah's increasingly cruel treatment. She'd grown bolder in her contempt, apparently convinced that I was too broken to leave her. She'd criticize everything I did, from my job search efforts to my appearance to my emotional state. She'd compare me unfavorably to other men, including, and this was particularly galling, Brad Morrison. "Brad was telling me about his new promotion," she'd say casually over dinner. "He's really going places in his career. It's impressive to see someone who knows how to adapt and succeed." The comment hit its mark, but I kept my expression neutral. "That's great for him. Some people know how to land on their feet, she continued. They don't let setbacks define them. Or she'd mention how Brad had taken his wife to expensive restaurants and weekend getaways. Some men know how to treat their women right, she'd say with a pointed look at me. I endured these comments because I knew they were building my case. Every cruel word, every comparison, every put down was evidence of her emotional abuse. And every time she mentioned Brad, she was inadvertently confirming their relationship. The breakthrough came when Martinez discovered that Sarah and Brad had been planning their affair for months before my layoff. Phone records showed they'd been in constant contact during the restructuring process. Text messages revealed that Brad had shared confidential information about the layoffs with Sarah, and she'd encouraged him to position himself for promotion. Your wife knew about the restructuring before you did, Martinez told me during one of our meetings. She was actively encouraging Morrison to eliminate your position. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined possible. While I'd been working late nights trying to save my job, my wife had been plotting with my colleague to destroy it. While I'd been trusting her with my fears and concerns about the company changes, she'd been feeding information to the man who was orchestrating my downfall. In other words, my wife had known about my impending job loss before I did. She'd been preparing for it by securing a relationship with the man who was orchestrating it. While I was working late nights trying to save my position, she was planning my replacement in both my career and my marriage. The final piece of evidence came when Martinez discovered that Sarah had been using our joint savings account to pay for gifts for Brad. Expensive watches, clothing, even a weekend trip to Napa Valley that she'd claimed was a work conference. She'd been using my money to fund her affair with the man who destroyed my career. She's been systematically draining your accounts, Martinez explained, showing me bank statements and credit card records. Over the past 6 months, she spent nearly $15,000 on this affair. $15,000. Money we'd saved for emergencies, for our future, for the house repairs we'd been planning. Money that was supposed to support us during my unemployment. She'd been using it to wine and dine the man who'd made me unemployed in the first place. That's when I knew it was time to act. I scheduled a meeting with Kellerman to finalize our strategy. We would file for divorce citing adultery and financial misconduct. We would seek asset protection to prevent Sarah from accessing our joint accounts. We would demand restitution for the money she'd spent on her affair. But first, I wanted to give Sarah one more chance to show her true colors. I wanted to see just how far she'd go in her cruelty and manipulation. I wanted her to dig her own grave so deep that no one could ever question who the victim was in this situation. So I started playing the part of the grateful, desperate husband. I thanked her for staying with me during my difficult time. I apologized for being a burden. I promised to try harder to find work and be more appreciative of her sacrifice. I know this has been hard on you, I told her one evening after she'd made another cutting comment about my job search. I'm grateful you're sticking with me through this. Sarah ate it up. She became even more condescending, more demanding, more openly contemptuous. She started making rules about how I should spend my time, what I should wear, how I should behave. She treated me like a child who needed constant supervision and correction. You need to understand your position here, she told me one evening after I'd prepared dinner for us. I'm the one working. I'm the one paying the bills. I'm the one keeping this household together. The least you can do is show some gratitude. I nodded and apologized, all while the recording app on my phone captured every word. Martinez had taught me about single-party consent laws in our state, and I'd been documenting every conversation for weeks. The cruelest moment came when Sarah suggested that maybe I should consider taking a minimum wage job just to contribute something to our finances. Pride isn't going to pay our mortgage, she said. Maybe it's time to accept that you're not the successful man you used to be. She said this while wearing a new designer dress that I later discovered Brad had bought for her. She said this while planning another weekend getaway with her lover. She said this while using our joint credit card to pay for couples' massages at an expensive spa. You're right, I said, forcing humility into my voice. I should be willing to take whatever I can get. Finally, she said with satisfaction, some realistic thinking. But her biggest mistake was underestimating me. She thought that losing my job had broken my spirit, made me weak and dependent. She thought I'd accept any treatment just to keep her in my life. She thought I was too grateful for her presence to question her behavior. She was wrong on all counts. During this time, I also discovered something else that would prove crucial to my case. Through Martinez's investigation, I learned that Brad Morrison was married to Jennifer Morrison, the daughter of the CEO of Morrison Industries, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the region. More importantly, Morrison Industries was a major client of Sarah's advertising firm. This meant that Sarah's affair with Brad wasn't just adultery, it was a conflict of interest that violated her company's ethics policies. She was having an affair with the family member of a major client, which could compromise her professional judgment and create legal liability for her employer. The morning after her latest girls' night, which Martinez had documented as another hotel rendezvous with Brad, I was ready to make my move. I'd gathered months of evidence, consulted with the best divorce attorney in the city, and prepared for every possible scenario. Sarah came home at 11 a.m., claiming she'd stayed at her friend Jessica's house after drinking too much. She looked disheveled and guilty, but still managed to be condescending. "I hope you used your time productively last night," she said, not even bothering to shower before criticizing me. "Maybe you could have spent it working on your resume instead of feeling sorry for yourself." I looked at her standing there in yesterday's clothes, her makeup smeared, her hair messy from a night with another man, and I felt nothing but disgust. This woman had promised to love and honor me through better and worse, and at the first sign of difficulty, she'd betrayed me with the man who'd orchestrated my downfall. "Actually," I said calmly, "I did spend the evening productively. I was reviewing some documents with my attorney." Sarah's face went pale. "Your attorney? What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed her one of Martinez's photos, her and Brad kissing in the hotel parking lot 3 nights ago. "I'm talking about this, Sarah. I'm talking about your affair with Brad Morrison." Her mouth dropped open. For a moment she looked like she might try to deny it, but the evidence was right there in front of her. "You had me followed," she said, her voice rising. "I had a cheating wife investigated," I corrected. "I documented financial theft and emotional abuse." Sarah's face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, fear, and finally, calculation. I could see her trying to figure out how to spin this situation to her advantage. "You can't prove anything meaningful," she said finally. "And even if you could, no one will care. You lost your job, Marcus. You became a failure. I had every right to find happiness elsewhere." "Actually," I said, pulling out a folder thick with documents, "I can prove everything. Photos, credit card statements, phone records, text messages. I have evidence that you knew about my layoff before I did. I have proof that you've been using our joint assets to fund your affair." Sarah's face went white. "You recorded our conversations. I documented abuse," I said. "I preserved evidence of financial misconduct and emotional cruelty." The doorbell rang and Sarah jumped. "Process server," I said. "Divorce papers citing adultery and financial misconduct. Also a restraining order preventing you from accessing our joint accounts." Sarah stared at me in shock as I walked to the door. The process server was a professional woman in her 30s who handed Sarah the papers with business-like efficiency. Sarah's hands shook as she read the documents. "You can't do this," she whispered. "We can work this out." "There's nothing to work out," I said. "You made your choice." Sarah's shock quickly turned to anger. "You think you're so smart. Brad and I will say this is all fabricated. We'll say you're a bitter, unemployed loser who can't accept that his wife found someone better." I smiled for the first time in months. "That's where you're wrong. See, I didn't just gather evidence of your affair. I also did some research into Brad's background. Did you know his wife Jennifer is the daughter of the CEO of Morrison Industries?" Sarah's face went ashen. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Jennifer Morrison is about to receive copies of all the evidence I've gathered. I'm saying that Brad's father-in-law is going to learn that his son-in-law has been having an affair with a married woman. I'm saying that your boss is going to discover that you've been having an affair with a client's family member." Sarah sank into a chair, the full implications hitting her. "You're going to destroy both of our careers." "I'm going to expose the truth," I said. "You destroyed your own careers when you decided to have an affair." The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and legal consultations. Kellerman had prepared for every contingency, and our case was airtight. Sarah's affair was documented beyond doubt. Her financial misconduct was clearly established. Her emotional abuse was recorded and witnessed. But the real satisfaction came when Martinez called to tell me that he delivered the evidence to Jennifer Morrison. Within an hour, Brad Morrison had been called into his boss's office. Within 2 hours, Sarah had been summoned to meet with her company's HR department. By the end of the day, both Sarah and Brad were facing serious consequences. Brad's position was under review, and Sarah was suspended pending investigation. The affair that was supposed to secure their success had instead put everything they'd worked for at risk. Sarah tried calling me that evening, but I didn't answer. She left voicemails begging me to reconsider, promising to end the affair, claiming she'd made a terrible mistake. But it was too late. The papers were filed, the evidence was documented, and the consequences were in motion. The divorce proceedings were swift and decisive. Sarah's adultery was proven beyond doubt, and her financial misconduct was clearly established. The judge awarded me the house, the majority of our assets, and restitution for the money she'd stolen to fund her affair. But the real justice came from the broader consequences. Within weeks, both Sarah and Brad had been terminated from their positions. Sarah's violation of company ethics policies made her unemployable in the advertising industry. Brad's affair with a client's family member destroyed his reputation in pharmaceutical sales. The professional consequences were swift and severe. Sarah's company couldn't risk the liability of employing someone who'd compromised client relationships through personal misconduct. Brad's company couldn't trust someone who'd violated professional boundaries and family obligations. Jennifer Morrison divorced Brad and took him for everything he had. His father-in-law's company blacklisted him throughout the industry. The man who destroyed my career found himself unemployable and financially ruined. Sarah tried to find work in advertising, but her reputation preceded her. Companies didn't want to hire someone who'd violated ethics policies and destroyed client relationships. She was forced to take a minimum wage job at a retail store, the same type of work she'd suggested I should consider during my unemployment. The irony was perfect. The woman who'd criticized me for being unemployed was now working retail for minimum wage. The woman who'd claimed I wasn't appreciative enough was now learning what real financial struggle looked like. But the most satisfying moment came 6 months later when I received a job offer from Morrison Industries. Jennifer Morrison's father had been impressed by how I'd handled the situation with professionalism and integrity. He offered me a position as vice president of sales, with a salary significantly higher than what I'd been making before. "We need people with character," he told me during our interview. "People who do the right thing even when it's difficult." I accepted the position and excelled in my new role. Within a year, I'd rebuilt my career and established myself as a respected leader in the industry. I'd proven that losing my job hadn't broken me, it had revealed my true strength and character. Sarah, meanwhile, was struggling to make ends meet in a studio apartment across town. The woman who'd once criticized me for being unemployed was now working retail for minimum wage. The woman who'd claimed I wasn't appreciative enough was now learning what real financial struggle looked like. Brad Morrison had fared even worse. His divorce had left him with nothing, and his reputation in the industry was destroyed. The man who'd orchestrated my downfall had fallen further than I ever had. The final irony came when I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop near my new office. She was wearing a store uniform, looking tired and defeated. When she saw me in my expensive suit, her face went pale. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I heard about your new job, congratulations." "Thank you," I said simply. "I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I'm sorry. I made terrible choices. I hurt you in ways that were unforgivable." I looked at her standing there in her retail uniform and I felt nothing but indifference. "You made your choices, Sarah. Now you're living with the consequences." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know, I just wanted you to know that I realize how wrong I was about everything." "I appreciate that," I said, "but it doesn't change anything." As I walked away, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 6 months ago, I'd been a broken man, unemployed and betrayed by the people I'd trusted most. Today, I was stronger, more successful, and more respected than I'd ever been. Sarah had been right about one thing: I should have been grateful, but not for her staying with me during my supposed failure. I should have been grateful that she'd revealed her true character when she did. I should have been grateful that she'd given me the opportunity to discover my own strength and resilience. Justice, it seemed, had a sense of humor. The man who destroyed my career had inadvertently connected me with the family that would elevate it to new heights. The woman who'd betrayed me had freed me to find something better. And sometimes, the best revenge was simply living well and letting the truth speak for itself.